And welcome back to yet another exciting edition of Light Beer, Dark Money. And I am Chris Clements. And as you can see, for those of you who are joining us online on YouTube or other video software, I'm missing somebody. I'm missing my partner in crime. And that's because he's on a little family vacation in places unknown. I can't describe where he is because that would not be a good thing. But so rather than having to guess, we're doing this whole podcast solo. As you can see, I got a haircut. I'm bearded. I just got back from hunting with my young boy down in Arkansas, of all places, and we got nothing. We wandered around the woods. We were in tents. We saw nothing, and we got nothing. And that was, but that wasn't really the point. The point was being with my son, who's 11 and has this fascination with armaments and the Second Amendment, and which I'm really proud of. I have to admit, it's a great thing. And took him to get legally and properly trained at the Scottsdale Gun Club several weeks ago. And he took to 22 like bees on honey. It was unbelievable, and he's a great shot. He's a much better shot than I am, and handles all that very, very well. So now I'm thinking maybe I might expand that love of firearms for him, seeing that Christmas is coming up. However, I'm here with our two producers, Robin and Alex. Alex is over there in the corner just hoping that I don't call on him. And Robin has a microphone.
I do. You have to be careful with that.
I know. It's great.
I think what we need to do for when Sean's gone is get him a big cardboard cutout.
We should give him a cardboard cutout. That would be great.
That would be really cool.
That would be perfect.
Yeah.
So, and maybe, you can have somebody behind there talking and just being Sean. We can have Alex do that. That would be great.
Kind of mimic him off in the corner on the mic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll work.
Well, I mean, I can talk to him like he's there, but he's not, and we miss him. But hey, there's so much going on in the world right now that how can you not have I guess I would just call it a Clem Solo podcast about everything that is happening. And it was preparing for this. It was really hard to kind of pick one issue, or two or three. And so I kind of came up with a little bit of a theme, and that's stupid is as stupid does. Borrowing that liberally from, of course, Forrest Gump, for those of you who don't know. And that was a line that he said in that movie, portrayed by Tom Hanks, where he was trying to say that, hey, judge me by my actions, not how I look. Well, guess what? We have a lot of really stupid people doing a lot of stupid things out there. And we can run down a large list, but instead, we're going to try to keep it small. Lead article in the Arizona Republic, front page this morning is, of course, the fact that Congressman Paul Gosar of Arizona was censured yesterday by Democrats and a couple of Republicans in the House of Representatives for putting out a tweet which depicted, apparently, I haven't seen it, and you can't find it now, it's been taken down, but depicting something having to do with Sandy Cortez and a beheading of Joe Biden, perhaps, or something like that. And it was tasteless, and stupid is as stupid does, and gave the Democrats a lot of ammunition after a really great week and a great couple weeks, I think, for conservatives and conservative values, and for the country after a earth-shattering win for Republicans in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The messaging was moving forward. There was momentum in stopping the Biden agenda, and then and quite frankly, Democrats knew this, and they were running scared, and they didn't have much to hang their hat on. They were able to get the infrastructure bill passed by coaxing 13 Acela Republicans to pass that bill. But then this tweet went out, and it creates issues with messaging. It creates issues with this portrayal of Republicans as violent and against America, and it also depicted something against their prized spokesperson in Sandy Cortez. And so, while we really like Paul, we think he does some good things for the state, but don't give them the ammunition to come after you like that. Just don't do it. And I think the issue going into the next election is, will Republicans who on the generic ballot now are 40 points ahead, which is still early, it's mid-November, and the election is a year away, will they be disciplined enough in both messaging and principle to both derail the Biden agenda with the Build Back Broke plan that's coming up soon, and move forward with an agenda of hope and prosperity and conservative principles? That remains to be seen. Will they learn from what happened in Virginia, where Glenn Youngkin run a very, very disciplined race with disciplined messaging and was able to capitalize on a lot of missteps by his opponent, specifically with regard to education, specifically with regard to critical race theory and other things happening in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. And he was able to stay on message, stay on principle, and sweep the House of Delegates and elect a lieutenant governor, an African-American lieutenant governor, and a Cuban-American attorney general. Would that fate be true for the rest of the country? That remains to be seen. And the reason it remains to be seen is, will we be disciplined enough to make sure that it happens? And it seems like Congressman Gosar, was not disciplined in that regard. Hubris is what takes over, and we think that we can just put out whatever messaging we want or put out something that we think is satirical. But now he's been stripped of both of his committees, of which he was a vocal member, and should have known that the left has been gunning for him ever since, literally, ever since the January 6th riots on Capitol Hill. So it's unfortunate. There are plenty of people on the left that I think, if the Republicans take over the House of Representatives next year, they should be worried. I think AOC should be worried. I think Ilhan Omar of Minnesota should be worried. I think there are other Democrats who've done some pretty questionable things within the public domain that should be worried of being censored as well. And it creates a enormously bad precedent. But at the same time, stupid is as stupid does, and don't do stupid things. And that brings us maybe to the next headline, of which I have to admit, I was not really paying attention to this at all. And that's this trial that's happening in Kenosha with Kyle Rittenhouse and his killing of two individuals during the riots in Kenosha over a year ago. And as a person who saw a lot of this develop over that summer, it was very unfortunate. We are against the people rioting. We are against the destruction of property, no matter what, and place the blame of those riots really on the governor, who didn't react well when they were beginning, and kind of just let them run their course. And that involves, and when you allow that to happen, bad actors do bad things, and people who are trying to confront bad actors end up doing stupid things. And the right-wing media has sort of had their day with this over the last week or two, after not ignoring it, but not giving it full measure. After there's some really big missteps by the prosecution, in which they had some of their star witnesses really help out Kyle in terms of confirming some of the things he had said happened when he was being pursued by these individuals that he then killed with his AR-15. At the same time, I think the prosecution has done a very interesting job of instilling doubt in the jury of Kyle Rittenhouse, of his character and his judgment. And although those are not necessarily illegal. I think the reason why it's taking several days to come to a conclusion on this case, now that the jury is out, is because the prosecution actually had that shred of doubt that they instilled into the jury. So it's going to be the governor this time has called out over 500 National Guard to dispel any rioting that happens if there is a acquittal. But at the same time, I think if there's a guilty verdict, the right will have their day as well, and there will be a lot of anger and a lot of discontent, and that's where our country finds herself in. Unfortunately, is this balkanization of people within our society, that you're left or right, there's no agreeing on anything. And I found myself listening to both the defense and the prosecution and some of their points, and agreeing that what Kyle did was stupid. Going down to a riot with an AK-47, or excuse me, an AR-15, and confronting the rioters, nothing good is going to happen. At the same time, the people that he shot, absolutely in self-defense, were not great actors. One of those individuals happened to be a pedophile, and probably, quite frankly, deserved his day. But stupid is as stupid does, and doing stupid things doesn't necessarily get you an acquittal. At the same time, it doesn't necessarily get you in jail. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next several days. And unfortunately, there's a lot of reports that this jury was not sequestered. They were followed. Activists who are bridging for riots and violence know who these people are, and so there's been some intimidation. And now the defense is saying they filed for a mistrial because they say that a video that was an aerial video, a drone video that was supplied by the prosecution was not clear. It was grainy, and then another video was supplied that showed some other evidence. So this could go on for quite some time. It'll be interesting to see what the judge does. He admonished the prosecution last week on some of their questioning of Kyle when he took the stand, and his silence after the shooting, which of course is your God-given right in this country, the right to remain silent. And that started the whole fireworks over the last week or so. Otherwise, I don't think a lot of people were really paying attention, other than the fact that the trial was happening and hoping for the best, and weren't sure what the facts were. But that's why you have a trial. That is why our system of justice ultimately should work, because evidence is presented and evidence is then analyzed by people who who can be impartial, and minds are changed. And I think a lot of people who might have been buying into the left's characterization of Kyle as this white supremacist and deranged young man actually saw that he's none of those things. He's actually just a kid who went down there and got himself in a situation that he couldn't control, which, if it were my kid, who's looking to expand his understanding and viewpoint of guns, I would never let him go down there, because nothing good can happen when you're traipsing through a riot with a AR-15. Just nothing. And I thought his breaking down the stand was really interesting, because that was a sign of trauma and dispelled trauma. And I don't, people have tried to characterize it in other ways, but I can't even imagine, what he's going through in his own head, and feel bad for him. But if he's convicted on a count or two, I wouldn't be surprised either, because of the characterization of his character and the jury's probably fear of not doing anything. Now, could it be a hung jury? Yeah, that could be the best outcome. Robin, you're nodding your head.
I agree. I mean, the kid did something stupid.
Yeah.
But if you were watching the footage this week, what did the prosecutor do? Anybody who is trained with firearms, number one, You never put your finger on that trigger.
Yeah.
You always have it on the side until you're ready to shoot. And number two, you never point at anything you're not willing to shoot.
Exactly.
That just blew my mind.
Yeah. It's amazing how that ties in with exactly what we were teaching my son over a week ago with a 22 rifle. And yet the prosecutor, in order to make some sort of strange point, decided to point it at the jury, which I can't think that goes over very well in their deliberations. But, you know, he's sometimes drama and that sort of instilling that sort of fear in jurors works. Sometimes it backfires. But, yeah, the prosecution has made some really some missteps. And some people have thought that maybe they made those missteps because they knew they didn't really have a case. They overcharged the case, and they were hoping that things, you know, somebody said the other day it's like they were hoping for an acquittal, which I don't know about that, but they definitely made some missteps, and that's for the jury to decide, unfortunately, and hopefully the good citizens of Kenosha, Wisconsin are bracing for the worst, and that's an unfortunate part of our body politic right now. That more riots could happen, regardless maybe of the outcome, because you have bad actors who that's their mode of operating, and what they want to do is sow discontent no matter what, and that's a sad part of our country. The other area of this idea of stupid does is I mentioned earlier that this infrastructure bill was passed and gloriously glorified by our two Democratic senators here in the state of Arizona, and we actually got to see Mark Kelly come out for it, which we've been kind of giving Senator Kelly a hard time because nobody ever sees him. Mm-hmm. In fact, he's absent from pretty much anywhere. Nobody sees him in Tucson, where he supposedly lives.
Is he still off in space somewhere?
And that's sort of the joke, right? I mean, that he's off in space, but he came out, you know, in the public arena along with all the other. I don't know if Mark is necessarily a socialist or a communist, but he associates with them. And we saw the mayor of the old Pueblo, Regina Romero, hanging out with Bill de Blasio and tweeting about it, which I couldn't believe, because it's sort of Tucson. You get what you know. Elections have consequences. That's who you have, and that's unfortunate. But with Mark Kelly, he's been touting the infrastructure bill. Kyrsten Sinema's been touting the infrastructure bill, and she led on that. And 19 Republicans supported it. But the interesting part about the bill is that it does nothing for several years. And so when we talk about shovel-ready projects, there are no shovel-ready projects with regard to the infrastructure bill. There's only $5 billion slated to be spent next year, and most of the money starts getting spent in 2023 and then thereafter. So you had 13 Republicans on the House support the bill, bail out Nancy Pelosi. It was an opportunity after the victories in Virginia to really just kill it. But they're the Northeast Republicans. They're the Acela Republicans. They rely on Amtrak, and they rely on mass transportation initiatives that a lot of us out west just don't. It doesn't compute with us. At the same time, there's going to be, apparently, as part of the bill, there's going to be a new Amtrak line between Tucson and Phoenix. Did you know that?
No, didn't have a clue.
Yeah, but what you don't know about that, as they expand those lines, and Amtrak has been losing money, for anybody who doesn't know, for a bazillion years. I mean, it is the bottomless pit. It's like the U.S. Postal Service. Amtrak and the U.S. Postal Service are pretty much the same. They lose money every year. They're only supported by massive subsidies from your tax dollars. And now they want to expand, or they want to add I don't know if it's a high-speed line or a Acela line between Tucson and Phoenix, but the whole thing about that is those communities have to support that. They have to spend money out of their coffers to support that line. It doesn't just come from the federal government. So eventually that money runs out. And then what are you going to do? And eventually these things just perpetuate themselves. And then you run out of other people's money, which is what Margaret Thatcher famously said about socialism. You run out of other people's money. But let your heart not be troubled, because they are trying to pass this Build Back Better plan, which is all about spending your money in ways that makes no sense at all. It is the definition of stupid is, stupid does. It's calling for massive tax increases on the middle class. It's calling for massive spending increases. They're trying to pare it down to $1.7, $1.5, $1.2 trillion, of which the vast majority is on Green New Deal initiatives and entitlements that we will never get away from. Now, the way they're doing it is sunsetting many of these programs in future years, which we all know from our experience in dealing with the federal government, nothing sunsets. There isn't an entitlement in the great history of our country where anything has sunsetted. And so these entitlements like paid family leave and all-day kindergarten and all these different things likely will not sunset. And so the $1.5 trillion bill that they've pared down through accounting gimmicks will likely still be the $5 to $6 trillion that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have been touting for all along. And that just bankrupts our country. The inflation numbers came out last week. We are seeing inflation that we have not seen in 30 years. Inflation is a tax on poor and lower middle class people. The administration several months ago tried to, wave it off as a high class problem, is what the Biden chief of staff had mentioned on Twitter, and it's not. It's inflation is the cruelest tax of all, and you're seeing it on the gas tank. This is going to be the most expensive Thanksgiving, they're saying, in years, if not since the 1970s. And so everything old is new again. It's that 70s show in Washington, D.C., and for America. I'm waiting for a remake of Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. Because back then, gas prices were through the roof. We were at war with Iran. The Middle East was imploding. And inflation and interest rates were out of control. And it all had to do with how the government increased spending over many years during the 60s and early 70s, to the point where you had in the mid 70s and late 70s stagflation, where inflationary growth is outpacing just nominal economic growth, and so nothing happens. So it's like growing up again in the 70s. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the 70s? I do.
Yeah, so do I. Nothing changes if nothing changes, and here we go. The cycle continues again,
Yeah, it's like Biden is Jimmy Carter, all over again. He's Jimmy Biden, maybe. I don't know. But it's an interesting place. And again, all eyes on this Build Back Broke plan are on Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin of West Virginia. And they haven't signaled anything different over the last several weeks in terms of where their support is, other than Joe Manchin tweeting out how these inflation numbers are totally unacceptable. And I think we're hoping that he stands firm and gives America a big pause on all this inflationary spending, which goes back even to the COVID relief plan of $1.9 trillion that was passed in the spring with no Republican support. There is no Republican support for this plan. So it's interesting, Joe Biden in one breath on a bridge in New Hampshire can talk about the infrastructure plan being this great thing of bipartisanship, and then the next breath talk about how his Build Back Better plan is the end-all, beat-all, and will do all these wonderful things for the economy, and he has zero Republican support. Why? Because it raises taxes and regulations on the least of these. So that is where we find ourselves in America. And at the same time, Senator Chuck Schumer has released the holiday schedule for senators where they are going to really try to pass a lot. And we are heading towards an interesting game of chicken again with both the debt ceiling and the budget. And the question then becomes, will will Mitch McConnell, the minority leader, play Scrooge, or will he play Santa Claus to Chuck Schumer? If he plays Scrooge, the Republic could be saved. If he says, yes, listen, Chuck, I gave you an out back in October. I helped you out with the debt ceiling. We're not doing it again. Oh, and by the way, we're not voting for an extension we're not voting for the reconciliation plan. And oh, and by the way, we're not voting for a CR. So you got to go find the votes. And that is going to be the first 2 weeks of December is going to be a mass scramble of negotiations. If they can get this Build Back Broke plan back down to $500 billion or $500 billion, maybe they'll have something. But it's going to be an interesting several weeks leading into the holidays. And we've got a lot to be thankful for. We still live in the greatest country in the world, still live in the most free society in the world, but it's getting harder and harder to exercise those freedoms, to exercise our faith, our freedom, and our free enterprise in this country. And that's all I got today. That is the solo rant.
That's a lot.
That
That's a lot.
was a lot. I mean, stupid is as stupid does, and we have a choice in this country to either, rise up and be who God made us to be, or we're gonna sentence ourselves and our kids and our grandkids to more debt and more despair with a lot of what is being proposed. So we're hopeful for a good turnout in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. We wish Congressman Gosar nothing but the best. We've worked with him on several issues in the past, and he's been a great friend of veterans and actually to the environment. I've worked with him on natural gas issues in the past, and Paul has always been very attentive to those things. But what he did with this tweet just kind of boggled the mind. But at the same time, on the other side, be careful what you do and what you wish for, because if Republicans take the House, they're going to be stripping a lot of folks of their committee assignments, I would imagine. And with that, thank you very much for listening. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, as well as YouTube. Be sure to subscribe anywhere you listen to your podcasts and listen to us every week. We'll be back next week with a special Thanksgiving edition. And just remember, this is a country based and founded on faith, freedom, and free enterprise. And we're here to keep it that way. God bless.